There is a specific frequency of noise that triggers the fight or flight response in the human brain. Evolutionarily speaking, it used to be the snap of a twig in a silent forest or the low growl of a predator in a cave. In modern suburbia, specifically in the manicured dystopian purgatory known as the Oak Creek Estates, that noise is the distinct, rhythmic clack-hiss-clack of a spray paint can being shaken vigorously at 7:03 on a Saturday morning. I was deep in a dream where I was fishing off a pier in Key West, a cold drink in my hand and absolutely no responsibilities on my horizon. The dream shattered instantly. I lay there for a second, staring at the ceiling fan that was spinning lazily, trying to process if the noise was real or a hallucination born of a late-night pizza binge. Clack, clack, clack. Hiss. It was real. And it was close. It sounded like it was practically inside my bedroom. I rolled over and looked at the digital clock. 7:03 a.m. "You have got to be kidding me," I groaned into my pillow. My wife, Sarah, had taken the kids to her mother's for the weekend, leaving me with a glorious 48 hours of planned nothingness. My schedule was supposed to involve coffee, a little bit of woodworking in the garage, perhaps a nap, and definitely watching the game. It was not supposed to involve aerosol-based vandalism at dawn. I kicked the duvet off, feeling the cool air hit my legs. I scrambled for my robe, a heavy plaid flannel thing that had seen better days and smelled faintly of sawdust and Old Spice, and shoved my feet into my slippers. One slipper slid on easily. The other required a bit of a hop step because the heel had been crushed flat by years of misuse. I stumbled out of the bedroom, down the hall, and navigated the living room like a man moving through a minefield of Legos, though thankfully the floor was clear. I reached the front door, unlocked the deadbolt with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house, and threw the door open. The morning light was blinding. It was one of those aggressively sunny mornings where the birds are screaming their lungs out and the dew is sparkling just to mock your tiredness. I squinted, shielding my eyes with a hand, trying to locate the source of the disturbance. There, standing at the base of the old general, that's what I call the massive 150-year-old white oak that anchors my front lawn, was a man. He was wearing a neon yellow safety vest over a stained blue t-shirt, cargo pants that had more pockets than a SWAT team, and heavy work boots. He held a can of fluorescent orange spray paint in his right hand, and on the rough, ancient bark of the old general, right at eye level, was a fresh, dripping, jagged orange X. The sight of it hit me in the gut. That tree was the reason I bought this house. It was a monster of a tree, a titan of nature, with a trunk so wide I couldn't wrap my arms even halfway around it. Its canopy was a sprawling green umbrella that shaded the entire front of my property, keeping my cooling bills low and my blood pressure down. It had survived droughts, storms, and probably the Civil War. And now this guy in a vest was graffitiing it like a subway car in the 80s. "Hey!" I bellowed. My voice cracked, thick with sleep and rage. "Hey, what in the hell do you think you're doing?" The man jumped. He actually dropped the cap of the spray paint can. He spun around, eyes wide, looking like a raccoon caught rummaging through a trash can. "Whoa, easy there," he stammered, holding the can up defensively. I marched down the porch steps, tightening the belt of my robe like I was preparing for a karate match. The dew soaked instantly through my slippers, freezing my toes, which only added fuel to my anger. "Easy," I snapped, closing the distance between us. "You're painting my tree. On my property. At 7 in the morning on a Saturday. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't turn the hose on you right now." The man took a step back, sizing me up. I'm not a small guy, 6'2", broad shoulders from years of working construction before I moved into engineering management. But in a bathrobe and soggy slippers, I probably didn't look like much of a threat. Still, I was angry, and anger carries a lot of weight. "Look, buddy," he said, his voice taking on that tired, defensive tone of a contractor who deals with homeowners all day. "I'm just doing the job. I'm the surveyor." "I don't care if you're the Pope," I said, stopping 3 feet from him. I pointed a shaking finger at the orange X. "You just defaced my property. That is a white oak. Do you know how hard it is to get paint out of bark?" "It's marking paint," he said, shifting his weight. "It's water-soluble, mostly. Look, name's Mike. I'm with Miller Land and Survey. I got a work order here." He fumbled with a clipboard that was leaning against the trunk of the tree. He pulled it up, flipping a page. "Address, 12102 Oak Lane. Homeowner, Frank Henderson. That you?" "That's me," I said, crossing my arms. "And I didn't hire a surveyor, Mike." Mike sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked tired. He looked like a guy who just wanted to mark his trees and go home to a cold beer. I could sympathize with the desire, but not the method. "I know you didn't," Mike said. He lowered his voice, glancing toward the street. "The association hired us. The HOA. They ordered a hazard assessment for the upcoming abatement project." I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "The HOA?" I repeated. "What hazard assessment?" "They're doing a sweep," Mike said, tapping the paper with a dirty fingernail. "Identified liabilities. Dead limbs, uplifted sidewalks, line-of-sight blockers. I was told to mark this one for removal." The world stopped spinning for a second. "Removal?" I whispered. "You have got to be joking. This tree isn't a hazard. It's the healthiest thing in this entire zip code." Mike looked at the tree. He looked up into the canopy, where the morning sun was filtering through thousands of green leaves. He looked at the massive, sturdy trunk. Then he looked at me. "Between you and me," Mike said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's a beauty. Solid. I drilled a test bore on the other side just to check density. It's hard as rock. But the work order says Priority 1 hazard. Says the roots are compromising the community infrastructure." "What infrastructure?" I demanded, gesturing to the expanse of green lawn. "The only thing nearby is the sidewalk, and that's 20 feet away." Mike grimaced. "Yeah, well, I just mark 'em, Mr. Henderson. I don't write the orders." "Who wrote the order?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I could feel it in my bones. Before Mike could answer, a sound cut through the morning air. It was a high-pitched, electric whine, like a giant mosquito approaching. It grew louder, accompanied by the crunch of tires on gravel. I turned toward the street. Rolling around the corner was a golf cart. But to call it a golf cart was an insult to the sport of golf. It was a custom-modified champagne gold EZ-Go with a lifted suspension, chrome rims, and a plastic weather enclosure that was currently zipped up tight despite the perfect weather. It was her, Patricia, the president of the Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, the woman who once measured my grass with a ruler and fined me $50 because it was a quarter-inch over the regulation height during a rainy week when I couldn't mow. She pulled the cart right up to the curb, blocking my driveway. The electric motor whirred to a stop. She didn't get out immediately. She took a moment to adjust her visor in the rearview mirror, then unzipped the plastic door with a sharp zip sound. Patricia stepped out. She was wearing her uniform, white capri pants, a floral blouse that was bright enough to signal aircraft, and brand-new white sneakers that had never seen a speck of dirt. She held a clipboard, always the clipboard, clutched to her chest like a shield. "Good morning, Frank," she chirped. Her voice was sugary sweet, the kind of sweetness that masks a lethal dose of poison. "I see Mike is getting everything ready." I didn't return the smile. "Patricia, why is there neon paint on my tree?" She walked up the driveway, her sneakers making no sound on the concrete. She stopped a safe distance away, eyeing my bathrobe with visible distaste. "Oh, Frank, don't be dramatic," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's just a hazard marking. We had an emergency board meeting on Thursday night. We voted to enforce the Community Safety and Aesthetics Clause, specifically Section 4.2.1 regarding dangerous flora." "Dangerous flora?" I laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Patricia, it's an oak tree. It's not a triffid. It's not going to eat the children." She pursed her lips. "It is a liability, Frank. We've had reports." "Reports from who?" "Concerned neighbors," she said vaguely. "The root system is aggressive. It's pushing toward the common areas. We have reason to believe it is threatening the integrity of the underground utilities and, more importantly, the community walkway." "That is a lie," I said flatly. "I'm an engineer, Patricia. I know how load-bearing structures work. I know how root systems spread. This tree is nowhere near the utility lines. The main line runs under the street, 30 feet from the drip line." Patricia's eyes narrowed. The sweet facade flickered, revealing the steel beneath. "The board disagrees," she said. "And as you know, the CC&Rs give the board the final say on safety determinations. We can't risk a lawsuit, Frank. Imagine if a root uplifted the sidewalk and little Timmy from down the street tripped and broke his arm. We'd be liable. You would be liable." "Mike," I said, not taking my eyes off her, "is the sidewalk uplifted?" Mike jumped. He clearly didn't want to be in the middle of this. He looked at Patricia, then at me. Mike stammered. "The concrete is currently level, yes. But what?" I pressed. Roots can be unpredictable," Mike finished lamely, clearly terrified of whatever power Patricia held over him. Patricia smiled triumphantly. "Exactly. Unpredictable. We are being proactive. The removal crew is scheduled for Tuesday morning." "Tuesday?" I shouted. "That's in 3 days. You can't just cut down a tree like this without a permit. You need a city inspection." Patricia pulled a piece of paper from her clipboard and held it out to me. "We have filed for an emergency hazard abatement," she said smoothly. "It bypasses the standard 30-day waiting period when there is an immediate threat to infrastructure. It's all perfectly legal, Frank. I spent all day yesterday with the HOA attorneys ensuring it was watertight." I snatched the paper from her hand. It was a formal notice, printed on thick, expensive paper. Notice of Hazard Abatement. Violation 4.2.1. Dangerous intrusive vegetation. Remedy: total removal and stump grinding. Scheduled date: October 14th. Cost assessment to homeowner: $4,800. My jaw dropped. "You expect me to pay for this? You want me to pay $5,000 to destroy my own property?" "It's actually a bargain," she said, checking her Apple Watch. "Individual removal for a tree of this magnitude would cost you $7,000 easily. But since we're doing the common area trees at the same time, we negotiated a bulk rate for you. You should be thanking us." "I'm not paying a dime," I said, shaking the paper. "And you are not touching this tree." Patricia sighed, the sound of a disappointed schoolteacher. "Frank, if you refuse access to the crew, we will have to fine you. The daily fine for obstructing a safety order is $500, plus legal fees. And if we have to get a court order to enter the property, those legal fees will be billed to your account. It could get very expensive. very quickly. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Look, Frank. Be reasonable. It's just a tree. It's messy. It drops acorns everywhere. It blocks the view. And there it was. The slip. The tell. I froze. The view? She blinked, realizing she'd said too much. The general line of sight. For safety. No, I said, my brain racing, connecting the dots. Not safety. The view of the pond, from the clubhouse. I looked past her, across the street to the community center. It was a modest brick building with a small pool. But for months, Patricia had been campaigning for an expansion. She wanted a wellness center. She wanted a massive outdoor patio with fire pits and a bar. I looked at the angle. If they built that patio extension where she wanted it. You want to extend the clubhouse patio, I said slowly. And my tree casts a shadow right where you want the sun deck. Patricia stiffened. Her posture became rigid. The clubhouse expansion is for the good of the community. Property values will skyrocket. You want a tanning deck? I accused. You're killing a 150-year-old living organism because you want to drink Pinot Grigio in the sun without a shadow falling on your face. It is a hazard, she snapped, her face flushing pink. And it is coming down Tuesday at 8 o'clock a.m. Make sure your truck is moved from the driveway, Frank. The crane needs access. If we have to tow your vehicle, that's another fee. She turned on her heel and marched back to her gold cart. She zipped the door shut, revved the little electric engine, and peeled away, leaving a cloud of self-righteousness in her wake. I stood there, clutching the notice, my knuckles white. I looked at Mike. Mike was carefully capping his spray paint. He looked miserable. Mike, I said quietly. Yeah? Tell me the truth. Is there any root damage? Any at all? Mike looked around to make sure Patricia was gone. He walked a few steps closer. Frank, he said, I've been surveying for 20 years. That tree is solid. The roots go deep, not wide. It's nowhere near the pipes. She made it clear that if we didn't find a hazard, our contract for the new patio wouldn't get approved. I knew it, I hissed. She's extorting you to falsify a report. I didn't falsify anything, Mike said quickly, raising his hands. I just marked it as a potential liability. That's subjective. It covers my ass. But yeah, it's a hit job. She hates this tree. She told my boss it makes the neighborhood look unkept. Unkept, I muttered. It's a majestic white oak, not a weed. Look, I gotta go, Mike said, backing toward his truck. I got 6 more houses to mark. But good luck, man. She's a steamroller. Once she gets the lawyers involved, usually people just fold. I don't fold, I said. Not for her. Mike climbed into his truck and drove off, leaving me alone on the lawn. I looked at the orange X. It felt like a wound. Tuesday. That was 3 days away. Monday was a holiday. Columbus Day, which meant all the county offices would be closed. I couldn't go down to the permit office and file a complaint. I couldn't get a city inspector out here to contradict her report because they were off for the long weekend. By the time the offices opened on Tuesday morning, the crew would already be here. The saws would be running. It was a tactical strike. She had planned this perfectly. She notified me on a Saturday morning of a holiday weekend, giving me 0 business days to react before the demolition. I felt a surge of panic. $4,800, and the loss of the tree. If I did nothing, I lost. If I physically stopped them, I'd get arrested and fined. If I sued them later, the tree would already be a stump. You can't uncut a tree. I walked back up the porch steps, my mind racing. I needed a plan. I needed a weapon. I needed someone who knew more about trees and property law than Patricia and her team of suburban lawyers. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. I needed the caffeine. I pulled out my phone and stared at it. I needed an expert, not just a surveyor. I needed a heavy hitter. I scrolled through my contacts, past Pizza Place and Plumber Dave, until I found a name I hadn't dialed in 5 years. Silas Doc Green. Doc wasn't just an arborist. He was a force of nature. He was a man who had once chained himself to a redwood in California to stop a highway expansion. He had a PhD in botany and a beard that could hide a badger. We had worked together on a commercial project years ago where the developers tried to cut corners on environmental regulations. Doc had shut down a $40 million site with a single clipboard and a terrifying knowledge of migratory bird patterns. He was crazy. He was abrasive. He smelled like pine resin and old coffee. And he was exactly who I needed. I hit the call button. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a voice answered. It sounded like gravel tumbling inside a cement mixer. "This better be about a plant," the voice said. "If this is a telemarketer, I will compost you." "Doc," I said, "it's Frank Henderson." There was a pause. "Frankie? The structural engineer? The guy who knows the difference between a load-bearing wall and a suggestion?" "That's me. I haven't heard from you since the Springfield job. Did a bridge collapse?" "No," I said. "But I have a situation, a crisis, and I need the Lorax." Doc chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "I'm listening. I have a white oak in my front yard, Quercus alba. It's got to be 150 years old, 50-inch diameter at least." "Ooh," Doc said, his tone shifting from annoyed to interested. "A grandfather oak, rare in the suburbs. What about it?" "My HOA president just tagged it for removal. She claims it's a hazard. She says the roots are a liability." "Is it?" "No. It's healthy. But she wants to build a patio for the clubhouse, and my tree is in the way. She's using an emergency abatement order to bypass the city permits. She's cutting it down Tuesday morning." Silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, dangerous silence. "Tuesday?" Doc asked. "That's aggressive? Bypassing the city arborist?" "Yes. And Monday is a holiday, so I can't get an injunction." "Frank," Doc said, and I could hear the sound of him standing up, keys jingling. "What's your address?" I told him. "I'm 40 minutes away. Put on a fresh pot of coffee, black. And Frank?" "Yeah? Don't let anyone touch that tree. If she comes back, tell her you've retained independent counsel of the botanical variety." "I will. I'm on my way. We're going to war." I hung up the phone and looked out the window. The orange X was glaring at me in the sunlight. "You picked the wrong tree, Patricia," I whispered. "And you definitely picked the wrong engineer." I went to my office, the spare bedroom where I kept my drafting table and my old code books, and started digging. I pulled out the original subdivision plat maps I'd saved from when I bought the house. I pulled out the county zoning laws. If she wanted to play the liability card, I was going to rewrite the deck. About 45 minutes later, a truck that looked like it had survived. The apocalypse roared into my driveway. It was a Ford F-350, lifted, dented, and covered in mud. The bed was full of ropes, climbing gear, and chainsaws. A bumper sticker on the back read, "My lawyer is a photosynthesizing organism." The door creaked open, and Doc Silas stepped out. He was 6'4", wearing flannel despite the heat, with a beard that reached his chest and sunglasses that hid his eyes. He carried a leather satchel and a metal probe that looked like a spear. He didn't wave. He didn't say hello. He walked straight to the tree, ignoring the sidewalk entirely. I watched from the porch as he approached the oak. He took off his sunglasses. He placed both hands flat against the trunk, right over the orange paint. He closed his eyes. It was theatrical, sure, but with Doc, you let him do his thing. After a long minute, he opened his eyes and looked up into the canopy. He walked around the base, kicking the dirt, examining the root flare. He pulled out a tape measure and wrapped it around the trunk. He stared at the measurement. Then he looked at the house, then at the clubhouse across the street. He turned and marched up the driveway to where I was standing. "Frank," he said, his voice deadly serious. "Doc, what's the verdict?" "The verdict is that your HOA president is a criminal," Doc said. "This tree isn't just healthy, Frank. It's a specimen. Do you know what the growth rate of a white oak is in this soil density? Slow. Glacial. This tree was here when the ink was drying on the Constitution, or close to it. To cut this down for a patio?" He spat on the ground. "It's a sin. It's a botanical hate crime." "Can we stop her?" I asked. "Legally. She has the abatement order." Doc grinned. It was a terrifying expression, mostly teeth and beard. "The abatement order relies on the premise that the tree is a hazard. If we can prove it's not a hazard, the order is void. But that takes time. We'd have to go to court, get experts, fight the battle while the tree is already sawdust." My heart sank. "So we're screwed." "No," Doc said. He tapped the side of his head. "We don't fight the hazard label. That's a defensive move. We go on the offensive. We change the status of the tree entirely." "Change the status? To what?" "Frank, have you ever heard of the Heritage Tree Act?" "No." "It's a county ordinance, passed in the late 90s, mostly forgotten. It was designed to protect historic landmarks, but the wording is very specific. It protects any native tree over a certain diameter that provides significant ecological value or historic continuity." He gestured to the massive trunk. "This tree is 52 inches in diameter. The cutoff for heritage status is 36. This isn't just a tree, Frank. Under County Code 14B, this is a federally protected monument. Or at least, it can be." "Can be?" I asked. "How do we make it one?" Doc pulled a ruggedized laptop out of his satchel. "I'm a certified master arborist with the state. I have login credentials for the county's environmental database. I can file an emergency designation request. The second I hit submit, the tree enters a pending protected status. It freezes all permits. It freezes all abatement orders. It creates a legal force field around this thing that not even the Supreme Court can penetrate without a hearing." "Do it," I said. "File it." Doc hesitated. "It costs $200 for the filing fee." "I'll write you a check right now." "And," Doc added, his eyes twinkling, "once it's a heritage tree, there are restrictions." "What kind of restrictions?" "Critical root zone restrictions. You can't build within a radius of the tree defined by its diameter. For this tree, that radius is about 75 feet. I looked at the clubhouse. 75 feet would cover the entire area where Patricia wanted to build her patio. It would make her project physically impossible." "Doc," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "that's not a restriction. That's the punchline." Doc laughed. He set his laptop on the hood of my truck and cracked his knuckles. "All right then, let's create a heritage site." Silas typed with 2 fingers, hunting and pecking like a bear trying to play a piano, but he moved with a terrifying speed. He hit the enter key with a force that made the ruggedized plastic of the HOA laptop groan. A progress bar spun on the screen. Connecting to county server. Verifying credentials. I held my breath. A blue jay screamed from the branches of the oak tree, as if cheering us on. "Come on," Silas muttered into his beard. "Don't give me a timeout error now, you government piece of junk." The screen flashed green. Submission successful. File number 8839B generated. Status: pending review. Temporary protection active. Silas let out a breath that smelled of peppermint and stale tobacco. He turned the laptop around so I could see it. "Congratulations, Frank," he said, his grin widening. "You are now the custodian of a Class A protected habitat. As of 10 seconds ago, this tree has the same legal standing as a bald eagle's nest." I looked at the screen. It was beautiful. It was the digital equivalent of a riot shield. "So, what now?" I asked. "Do I print this out and tape it to her forehead?" Silas slammed the laptop shut and slid it back into his satchel. "Absolutely not." "Why not? If I show her this, she has to stop." Frank, Silas said, shaking his head like I was a disappointed parent. "Think about the objective here. If you show her this now, what happens? She huffs, she puffs, she cancels the crew. She loses nothing but a little bit of pride. She goes back to the drawing board and tries to find another way to make your life miserable." He walked over to the tree and patted the bark affectionately. "But," he continued, "if you wait, if you let her mobilize the crew on Tuesday morning, if you let the heavy machinery roll onto the pavement, then she incurs cost. Mobilization fees, cancellation fees, breach of contract penalties." I felt a wicked smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Malicious compliance. Exactly. Plus, Silas added, pointing across the street to the clubhouse, "Didn't you say she's rushing this? Bypassing the permit process?" "Yeah. Monday is a holiday. She wants it down before the city opens on Tuesday. That means she's likely paid a premium for the crew, holiday rates, emergency rush fees, and she's probably put down a deposit on the construction materials for that patio, banking on the fact that the space will be clear by Tuesday afternoon." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Let her dig the hole, Frank. Let her jump in with both feet. Only when she gives the order to cut, only when the crime is in progress, do you play the card. That way, she's not just wrong, she's liable." "You're a bad man, Doc," I said. "I'm a distinct biological advantage," he corrected. "Now, I need to go. I have to go calibrate a moisture sensor in a redwood grove, but I've emailed you the PDF of the protection order. Print it out, put it in a binder, a nice, official-looking binder, and wait." "What about the critical root zone?" I asked. "You said something about restrictions." "Right, the CRZ," Silas said, sketching a circle in the air with his finger. "The formula is simple. Radius equals 1.5 feet for every inch of trunk diameter. Your tree is 52 inches. That's a 78-foot radius from the trunk center." I looked at the imaginary line. 78 feet extended well past the sidewalk, across the street, and deep into the lawn of the community center. "That covers the entire proposed patio area," I said. "It sure does," Silas said, climbing back into his monster truck. "Under the Heritage Act, you cannot pour concrete trench for utilities or change the soil grade within the CRZ. If she wants to build that patio, she'll have to build it levitating in the air." He cranked the engine. The truck roared to life, spewing a cloud of dark exhaust. "Call the cops when the saws come out, Frank. Don't engage the crew yourself. Let the boys in blue do the heavy lifting." And with that, he backed out over my curb, ironically crushing a small patch of Patricia's beloved HOA-mandated petunias, and rumbled away. I went inside and checked my email. The PDF was there. I printed it. I printed 2 copies, just in case. I put them in a navy blue binder. I placed the binder on the entry table next to my keys. Then I waited. Sunday night. The belly of the beast. The notification pinged on my phone at 4:00 p.m. on Sunday. It was an email blast from the HOA board. Reminder: Emergency Community Town Hall. Topic: Ratification of Budget for Wellness Center, Expansion and Hazard Abatement. Time: 7:00 p.m. Location: the Clubhouse Main Hall. I hadn't planned on going. Usually, HOA meetings were just opportunities for people to complain about garbage cans being left out too long or teenagers skateboarding too loudly. But this was the ratification. This was where they signed the checks. If I was going to spring this trap, I needed them to be fully committed. I needed them to be all in. I showered and put on a collared shirt. I didn't want to look like the crazy guy in the bathrobe anymore. I wanted to look like the defeated suburbanite who knew he was beaten. I walked across the street to the clubhouse. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was walking across the very ground that was about to become a federally protected, no-build zone. The meeting hall was a sterile room with fluorescent lighting that hummed aggressively and folding chairs that were designed by someone who hated the human spine. There were about 30 people there. Most were the regulars, the retirees with nothing better to do, the busybodies, and the few unfortunate souls who had been dragged there by their spouses. At the front of the room, sitting behind a long folding table draped in a cheap plastic tablecloth, sat the board. There was Jerry, the treasurer, a nervous man who always looked like he was about to confess to a crime. There was Susan, the secretary, who took notes with a fervor that was honestly frightening. And in the center, sitting on a slightly higher chair than everyone else, was Patricia. She was wearing a headset microphone, even though the room was small enough that a whisper would carry. She looked victorious. She looked like Caesar returning to Rome. I slipped into the back row and sat down. Patricia's eyes snapped to me instantly. A smirk curled her lips. She tapped her microphone. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice amplified and tinny. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have a very exciting agenda tonight." She clicked a remote, and a projector screen flickered to life behind her. It showed a rendering of the new Wellness Center. It was hideous. It was a sprawling concrete patio with a pergola, a massive fire pit, and what looked like an outdoor wet bar. And in the rendering, my oak tree was conspicuously absent. In its place was a generic, potted palm tree. "As you know," Patricia narrated, standing up and pacing, "we are moving forward with the enhancement of our community assets. The new patio will increase our property values by an estimated 4%. A murmur of approval went through the room. People liked property values. "However," she continued, her eyes drifting back to me, "to achieve this vision, and to ensure the safety of our residents, we must deal with certain obstacles, specifically the hazardous vegetation on Lot 402. Heads turned. 30 pairs of eyes looked at me. I slumped in my chair, staring at my shoes. I tried to radiate defeat. "We have fast-tracked the removal," Patricia said, clicking to the next slide. It was a spreadsheet. "We are using the Emergency Reserve Fund to pay for the abatement crew and to put the down payment on the construction materials. Because Monday is a holiday, we have to secure the contractors tonight to ensure work begins Tuesday morning." She looked at Jerry, the treasurer. "Jerry, can you walk us through the numbers?" Jerry stood up, shaking slightly. Yes. The tree removal is $4,800. which we will initially cover and then, bill to the homeowner. He coughed. The deposit for the patio concrete and stonework is $15,000. It is non-refundable because we are asking for a rush order. $15,000. Non-refundable. My heart did a little flip. It was perfect. I have a question, I said, raising my hand slowly. Patricia rolled her eyes. Yes, Frank, please keep it brief. We have a lot to get through. I stood up. I kept my voice low, trembling just a little. Patricia, are you sure about this? $15,000 is a lot of money. What if there's a delay? What if the tree can't be cut on Tuesday? Patricia laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Frank, we have the abatement order. We have the crew booked. There will be no delays unless you plan on chaining yourself to the trunk, in which case we will have the police remove you. I'm not going to chain myself to anything, I said softly. I checked the bylaws. If the project is cancelled, doesn't that money come out of the general fund? The neighbor's money? The project will not be cancelled, Patricia snapped. Stop trying to scare people, Frank. You lost. The board voted. It's done. She turned to the room, spreading her arms. I need a motion to ratify the immediate release of funds, $19,800 total. This locks in our contractors for Tuesday. Motion to approve, said a man in the front row. Billings, Patricia's sycophant neighbor. Second, said Susan. All in favor? Patricia asked. A sea of hands went up. Opposed? I raised my hand. I was the only one. The motion carries. Patricia slammed a gavel down. It looked like a toy gavel, but she used it with the force of a judge. Jerry, cut the checks tonight. I want those contractors paid and locked in. She looked at me one last time, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Frank, please ensure your driveway is clear by 7:30 a.m. Tuesday. We wouldn't want to tow you. I understand, I said. I'll be ready. I walked out of the meeting. As soon as the door closed behind me and the cool night air hit my face, I dropped the act. I walked home with a bounce in my step. She had just signed a check for $20,000 of the community's money for a project that was legally impossible. She had tied the anchor around her own neck. Now, all I had to do was wait for her to jump off the boat. Monday. The long wait. Monday was a blur of nervous energy. It was Columbus Day, so the world was quiet. No mail, no banks, no government offices. I spent the day doing prep work. First, I moved my truck. Not out of the driveway, but deeper into it, parking it parallel to the house so it was technically clear of the work zone, but still ominously present. Then, I set up the cameras. I had a Ring doorbell, but I wanted better angles. I mounted a GoPro in the window of the upstairs guest room, pointing directly at the tree. I mounted another one inside the front living room window. If this was going to happen, I wanted it in 4K. Around noon, my neighbor Bill, the nice one, came over. He looked worried. Frank, he said, leaning over the fence while I was pretending to weed the garden. I was at the meeting last night. You really gonna let them take the old general? Doesn't look like I have a choice, Bill, I said, staying in character. They voted. It's a damn shame, Bill spat. That patio's going to be noisy and ugly. I like the tree. Me too, Bill. Me too. If you want... Bill hesitated, looking around to make sure the HOA spies weren't listening. I have a cousin, a lawyer. He says maybe you could file a cease and desist. Monday's a holiday, Bill. Courts are closed. Bill kicked the dirt. Yeah, she knew that. She planned it. She sure did. Well, Bill sighed. I'm gonna go to work tomorrow early. I can't watch them cut it. Actually, Bill, I said, standing up and wiping dirt from my hands. You might want to call in sick tomorrow. Grab a lawn chair. It might be educational. Bill squinted at me. He saw the glint in my eye. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded slowly. Right. Educational. I'll tell the wife to make popcorn. Tuesday morning. The invasion, 6:30 a.m. The sun wasn't even fully up yet when the noise started. It began as a low rumble, vibrating the coffee in my mug. I was sitting at the kitchen table, fully dressed. Jeans, work boots, flannel shirt. My binder was on the table in front of me. My phone was fully charged. I walked to the window. It was impressive. I had to give them that. Patricia wasn't messing around. A massive flatbed truck was backing down the street, carrying a yellow bucket loader. Behind it was a chipper truck, a terrifying machine designed to turn solid oak into mulch in seconds. 2 pickup trucks flanked the heavy machinery, and leading the parade, like a golden chariot of doom, was the golf cart. Patricia was already there. She was wearing a high-vis vest over her floral blouse today, presumably to look official. She held a walkie-talkie in one hand and her clipboard in the other. She was directing the trucks like an air traffic controller who had had too much espresso. I watched them set up. The crew hopped out. They were rough-looking guys, smoking cigarettes and adjusting their harnesses. They started pulling orange cones off the truck, blocking off the street in front of my house. Okay, I whispered to myself. Let them set up. Let the billable hours start ticking. 7 a.m. The doorbell rang. It was an aggressive ring. Ding-dong, ding-dong. I picked up the binder. I checked the GoPro feed on my phone to make sure it was recording. I took a deep breath. I opened the door. Standing there was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He was huge. He had a scar running down his cheek and forearms that were thicker than my thighs. He wore a helmet with ear protection attached. "Mr. Henderson?" he grunted. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "That's me. I'm Butch, foreman for Apex Tree Services. We're here for the hazard abatement." "I see that," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "We need access to the yard, and I need you to sign this liability waiver stating that you've removed all personal property from the drop zone." He held out a clipboard. "I'm not signing that, Butch," I said calmly. Butch blinked. He looked at the clipboard, then at me. "Sir, if you don't sign, we can't start. And if we can't start, the HOA lady says to call the cops." "Then I guess you better call the cops," I said. Butch sighed. He turned around and keyed his shoulder mic. "Yo, Patricia, homeowner is non-compliant. He won't sign." Patricia, who was standing at the end of the driveway, looked up. She stormed toward the porch. "Frank!" she yelled. "Stop this nonsense immediately! You are obstructing a contracted safety operation." "I'm not obstructing anything," I said. "I'm just refusing to sign a waiver for a job I didn't authorize." "We authorized it!" she shrieked. "The board! We ratified the budget last night. We paid the deposit. This is happening." She turned to Butch. "Cut it anyway. You have the right of entry under the CC&Rs. If he interferes, I will have him arrested." Butch looked uneasy. "Lady, I don't like cutting without a signature. If a branch falls on his roof..." "The HOA indemnifies you," Patricia shouted. "Just get the saw." Butch shrugged. "All right. Boys, fire 'em up." He signaled to his crew. One of the guys on the ground yanked the cord on a massive steel chainsaw. Roar! The sound ripped through the morning air. It was a violent, mechanical scream. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. The point of no return. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? Yes, I said, speaking clearly. I would like to report a felony in progress at 1402 Oak Lane. There are individuals attempting to destroy a federally protected environmental site. I need an officer immediately. Sir, is this a civil dispute? The dispatcher asked. No, ma'am. This is a violation of the County Heritage Protection Act. There is heavy machinery involved and immediate threat to protected habitat. Officers are on their way. I hung up. Outside, Butch was walking toward the tree. He was revving the chainsaw. Vroom, vroom. I stepped out onto the porch. Butch! I shouted over the noise. He looked up, revving the saw again. I've called the police, I yelled. I suggest you turn that off until they get here. Patricia laughed. She was standing on the lawn, safely away from the tree. Let him call. They'll just arrest him for filing a false report. Cut it, Butch. Cut it down. Butch hesitated. He looked at the crazy lady in the golf cart, then at the calm man on the porch. He killed the engine of the chainsaw. The silence that followed was heavy. I'll wait for the cops, Butch said, spitting on the grass. I get paid by the hour anyway. Coward, Patricia hissed at him. 10 minutes passed. The crew stood around, smoking. Patricia paced back and forth, muttering into her phone. I stood on the porch, holding my binder like a shield. Then the lights appeared. Blue and red, flashing against the morning sun. 2 squad cars pulled up. The first officer to step out was a young guy, looked like a rookie. But the second one was Sergeant Miller. I knew Miller. He was a veteran. He had been patrolling this neighborhood for 20 years. He had zero patience for nonsense. They walked up the driveway, hands resting on their belts. All right, turn the circus music down, Miller said, looking at the heavy machinery. Who called it in? I did, Sergeant, I said, walking down the steps. He called it in to harass us, Patricia shouted, rushing forward. Officer, arrest him! He is obstructing a hazard removal. I am the HOA president. Sergeant Miller held up a hand. Ma'am, step back. Let me talk to the homeowner. He looked at me. Frank, what's going on? We got a call about a protected habitat? That's right, Sergeant. Frank, Miller sighed, looking at the oak tree. It's a tree. A nice tree, sure. But did you really call 911 because you don't want the HOA to cut it? I called because it would be a crime if they did, I said. I opened the binder. I pulled out the document. The paper was crisp. The county seal was gold and shiny. Sergeant, I said, handing him the sheet protector. This tree was designated a Class A heritage tree by the County Department of Natural Resources on Saturday. File number 8839B. Miller took the binder. He put on his reading glasses. He read the header. He read the first paragraph. His eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. Heritage tree? He muttered. I haven't seen one of these in years. It's a fake! Patricia screamed. She was practically vibrating. He printed it off the internet. It's a forgery. Miller looked at her over the rim of his glasses. Ma'am, this has a digital verification QR code and a county seal. Faking this would be a federal crime. Frank, did you fake this? Scan the code, Sergeant, I said. It links directly to the county database. Miller pulled out his phone. He scanned the QR code on the document. He waited a second. Then he nodded. Well, I'll be damned, Miller said. Status, active. Protection level, maximum. He looked at Butch. Hey, you with the chainsaw. Butch stepped forward. Yeah? You got a permit to operate in a critical root zone of a heritage site? Butch's face went pale. A what? No. Nobody told me it was heritage. Well, it is, Miller said. State law says you touch that bark, it's a $50,000 fine per incident, and potential jail time for the operator. Butch dropped the chainsaw. I mean, he literally dropped it on the grass. He backed away with his hands up. Whoa. Nope. I'm out. I ain't going to jail for a homeowner dispute. I lost my license in '09. For a wetland violation. I ain't doing that again. Butch! Patricia shrieked. We have a contract! Contract's void, lady, Butch yelled back. He was already walking toward his truck. Illegal acts void the contract. Read the fine print. You can't leave. Patricia grabbed Sergeant Miller's arm. Officer, make them cut it. It's a hazard, sis. Miller pulled his arm away sharply. His face hardened. Ma'am, do not grab me, and let me explain something to you. This document? He tapped the binder. This is a court-level injunction. If you order that man to cut this tree, I will arrest you for solicitation of environmental damage. Do you understand? Patricia froze. She looked at the sergeant. She looked at the tree. She looked at me. But, she whispered, her voice trembling. But the money, we paid the deposit. I stepped forward. I wanted to make sure she heard this next part clearly. The deposit, I said, smiling. Right, the non-refundable deposit. And Butch here. Butch, since you mobilized the heavy equipment, do you charge a kill fee? Butch stopped at the door of his truck. He grinned. Standard industry practice. If the site is legally inaccessible upon arrival, client owes 50% of the total job cost for wasted time, plus the mobilization fee. So, I calculated loud enough for the neighbors, who were now gathering on their porches, to hear. That's $2,400 to the tree crew, plus the $15,000 non-refundable deposit for the patio materials. That you can't build. Why can't I build it? Patricia whispered. Sergeant, I said, could you read the section on the critical root zone? Miller flipped the page. Section 4. Restrictions. No permanent structures, foundations, or soil compaction within a radius of 1.5 feet per inch of diameter. For a tree this size, that's about 75 feet. I pointed to the clubhouse across the street. Patricia, your new patio is about 60 feet from this trunk. You can't pour concrete there. You can't even park your golf cart there. Patricia looked at the clubhouse. She looked at the invisible line that now destroyed her legacy project. Her face went white. Then it went red. Then it went a color I didn't think humans could achieve. You, she hissed at me. You knew! You let us vote! You let us sign the checks! I tried to tell you, I said, widening my eyes innocently. At the meeting, I asked if the deposit was refundable. You told me to stop trying to scare people. The neighbors were laughing now. Bill was actually eating popcorn on his porch. Butch's trucks roared to life. They began to back out, taking their chainsaws and their massive wood chipper with them. Sergeant Miller handed me back the binder. Mr. Henderson, keep this accessible. And maybe put up a sign. I will, Sergeant. Thank you. Patricia stood alone in the driveway. The queen of the estates had just blown nearly $20,000 of the association's money on a phantom project. Frank, she said, her voice shaking with rage. This isn't over. Oh, I think it is, Patricia, I said. But hey, look on the bright side. You saved the neighborhood from a very dangerous tree. It's now the safest tree in the county. She let out a scream of frustration that sent a flock of sparrows scattering from the branches of the old general. She stomped to her golf cart, slammed it into reverse, and sped off. I stood under the shade of my heritage oak, took a deep breath of the gasoline-tinged air, and smiled. But I knew Patricia. She wasn't done. She was wounded, and a wounded animal bites. I had won the battle, but the war for the HOA was just beginning. The silence that followed the departure of the heavy machinery was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't just the absence of noise. It was the presence of victory. The birds returned to the oak tree almost immediately, chirping with a smugness that suggested they knew exactly what had just happened. Bill, my neighbor from the left, wandered over to the fence line. He was holding a half-eaten bowl of popcorn and looking at me with a mixture of awe and terror. "Frank," Bill said, shaking his head, "I have lived next to you for 8 years. I thought you were just a guy who liked woodworking and quiet Sundays. I didn't know you were dangerous." "I'm not dangerous, Bill," I said, leaning against the rough bark of the heritage tree. "I'm just litigious. There's a difference." "You cost the HOA 20 grand in about 10 minutes, Bill noted. "Patricia looked like she was going to have a stroke." "She might," I said, "especially when she reads the fine print on the patio contract." But as satisfying as that Tuesday morning was, I knew the beast wasn't dead. You don't take down a tyrant like Patricia with one skirmish. You have to wait for the fallout. You have to wait for the bill to come due. And in an HOA, the bill always comes due. It took exactly 3 days. On Friday afternoon, the mailman delivered a white envelope to every house in the Oak Creek estates. It was marked, "Urgent, Official HOA Correspondence." I opened mine at the kitchen counter. Notice of Special Assessment. To all homeowners, due to unforeseen vendor cancellations and emergency legal consultations regarding the suspended Wellness Center project, the association is facing a budgetary shortfall for Q4. Pursuant to Bylaw 7.3, the board has voted to levy a special assessment to cover these costs. Amount due, $650,000 per household. Deadline, October 30th. I stared at the paper. $650. She wasn't just trying to cover her mistake. She was trying to make us pay for her incompetence. She was effectively asking the neighborhood to subsidize her own humiliation. My phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it started vibrating continuously like it was having a seizure. The neighborhood Facebook group, usually reserved for complaints about dog poop and suspicious vans, had gone nuclear. Linda, 404 Oak. $650? Is this a joke? I'm not paying for a patio we aren't getting. Mike, the surveyor, lurking. LOL. Dave, 502 Maple. It says legal consultations. Did Patricia get sued? Bill, ask Frank. He stopped the bulldozers. I smiled. It was time to stir the pot. I logged into the group. I didn't post a rant. I didn't post an opinion. I simply posted a PDF file. Uploaded Heritage Tree Declaration 8839B PDF. Uploaded HOA Bylaws Section 9 Removal of Officers.pdf. Frank Henderson. Neighbors, the unforeseen cancellation was because the president attempted to build an illegal structure on a federally protected environmental site. The $15,000 deposit was forfeited because she failed to secure permits. You are being fined $650 to pay for her mistake. Also, see attached for instructions on how to call an emergency recall vote. I hit enter. I sat back and took a sip of coffee. I gave it about 30 seconds. The first comment appeared. Dave. She did what? The second comment. Linda. I'm coming over, Frank. I have a printer. Let's draft a petition. By Saturday morning, my dining room looked like a campaign headquarters. Linda, Bill, and a guy named Roger, who I had never met but who was apparently furious about the assessment, were sitting at my table. We need 51% of the homeowners to sign the petition to force a recall election, I explained, pointing to the bylaws. That's 62 houses. I can get the moms, Linda said, her eyes steel-hard. Patricia banned sidewalk chalk last year. The moms have been waiting for this. I'll take the retirees, Roger grunted. She towed old Mr. Henderson's Buick, no relation to you, Frank, because it had a flat tire. They hate her. What about the legal stuff? Bill asked. Won't she try to stop the vote? She can try, I said. But I have something else up my sleeve. I pulled out a letter I had received that morning. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from the construction firm, Hardscape Masters LLC, the company that was supposed to build the patio. Mr. Henderson, we understand you are the owner of the heritage site blocking the Wellness Center project. We are currently preparing a lawsuit against the Oak Creek HOA for breach of contract and fraudulent misrepresentation. Patricia claimed she had clear title and permits. We are seeking the full contract value of $120,000. She didn't just lose the deposit, I told the group, waving the letter. She exposed the association to a $100,000 lawsuit. If we don't remove her, our dues aren't going up by $650. They're going up by thousands. The color drained from Roger's face. Okay, give me the clipboard. I'm going door to door. We got the signatures in 48 hours. We didn't just get 51%. We got 85%. It turns out, when you threaten people's bank accounts, they become very civic-minded. On Monday night, we marched to the Clubhouse. It wasn't a scheduled meeting. We used the emergency member intervention clause. We walked into the monthly board workshop, where Patricia and her cronies were trying to figure out how to spin the disaster, and slapped a stack of papers on the table. There were 50 of us. The room was packed. People were standing in the hallway. Patricia looked up from her notes. She looked tired. Her hair wasn't as perfect as usual. The stress of the heritage incident was showing. What is this? She demanded, standing up. This is a closed session, Frank. You can't just barge in here with a mob. It's not a mob, Patricia, I said, my voice calm and projecting to the back of the room. It's a quorum. I pointed to the stack of papers. That is a petition signed by 85% of the homeowners in Oak Creek Estates. We are calling for an immediate vote of no confidence and the removal of the president and treasurer for gross fiscal mismanagement. Jerry, the treasurer, squeaked. Me? Why me? Because you signed the check, Jerry, I said. You signed a $15,000 check for a project that had no permits on a holiday weekend without checking the site survey. I was following orders, Jerry stammered. And I, Patricia shouted, slamming her hand on the table, was improving this community. You ungrateful people, I have worked tirelessly for 6 years. I monitored the trash cans. I measured the grass. I kept your property values up. You tried to cut down a heritage tree, Linda yelled from the back. And now you want us to pay for it. That tree is a menace, Patricia shrieked, losing her composure entirely. It is a blight, and that designation is a trick, a loophole. It's the law, I said. And because of your little improvement project, we are now facing a lawsuit from Hardscape Masters. Did you tell the community about that, Patricia? Did you tell them that we might be on the hook for $100,000? The room gasped. Patricia went pale. She hadn't told them. We are handling that, she stammered. The HOA lawyers. The HOA lawyers work for us, I cut her off. Not you. And we are firing you. I turned to the room. All in favor of removing Patricia from the board, effective immediately? Aye! The sound was deafening. It shook the cheap acoustic tiles of the clubhouse ceiling. All opposed? Silence. Even Jerry didn't raise his hand. He was too busy trying to sink into his chair and disappear. The motion carries, I said. Patricia, please hand over the keys to the clubhouse and the credit card, and the golf cart. Patricia stood there for a long moment. Her empire had crumbled. The tyrant had fallen. She slowly reached into her purse. She slammed the keys on the table. Fine, she hissed. Take it. You deserve each other. But mark my words, Frank. Without me, this place will fall apart. The weeds will grow. The bins will be left out. It will be anarchy. We'll take our chances, I said. She grabbed her purse and stormed out the side door. She had to walk home, because I had just confiscated the golf cart. The transition was surprisingly smooth. Linda was elected interim president. Her first act was to cancel the special assessment. We settled with the construction company. Once we explained that the previous president had gone rogue and was removed, they agreed to drop the lawsuit in exchange for keeping the deposit. We lost the $15,000, but we saved the $120,000. It hurt, but it was a tuition fee for a valuable lesson. Never let a Karen run the checkbook. But the best part came on a Saturday morning, exactly 3 weeks after the day of the chainsaws. I was sitting on my porch, drinking coffee. The orange X on the tree was fading, scrubbing away by the rain. A familiar battered Ford F-350 rumbled up the driveway. Doc Silas hopped out. He was carrying a drill and a beautiful, heavy bronze plaque. "Morning, Frank," Doc boomed. "Ready to make it. Official?" "Born ready, Doc." We walked over to the tree. Silas found a spot on the trunk, facing the street, right at eye level. He used special screws that wouldn't harm the cambium layer. He mounted the plaque. He polished it with his sleeve. It read, Heritage Site, number 8839B. Specimen, Quercus alba, white oak. Estimated age, 165 years protected. Habitat. Any damage to this tree or its critical root zone is punishable by federal law. "It's beautiful," I said. "It's armor," Silas corrected. "Now, about that critical root zone." He pulled out a can of spray paint, green this time. "I need to mark the official boundary for the county records." He walked 78 feet from the trunk. He sprayed a small green dot on the sidewalk. Then he walked across the street. He sprayed a green dot right in the middle of the clubhouse parking lot. "You know," Silas said, scratching his beard, "technically that parking space is illegal now. Soil compaction." I looked at the parking space. It was the one marked reserved for HOA president. "Doc," I said, grinning, "is there a mechanism to restore the soil density? Maybe jackhammer up the asphalt and plant some wildflowers?" Silas's eyes twinkled. "For the health of the tree? It's practically mandatory." The neighborhood is quieter now. We instituted a new rule at the HOA. No board member serves more than 2 years, and any expense over $500 requires a community vote. The clubhouse patio never got built. Instead, we used the leftover budget to plant a community garden. Ironically, it's much nicer than the concrete slab Patricia wanted. Patricia still lives here. She has to. She can't sell her house because word got out about the assessment drama, and her property value took a hit. I see her sometimes, walking her poodle. She crosses the street to avoid walking under the oak tree. As for the tree, it's thriving. The orange X is gone. The leaves are turning a brilliant gold for autumn. Every now and then, I sit out on my porch in the evening with a cold beer, looking at that bronze plaque glinting in the sunset. It's a reminder. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds, or in my case, they tried to cut us down. They didn't know we were heritage. And as I sat there, listening to the wind rustle through the branches of the old general, I raised my bottle to the canopy. to the roots," I whispered. "The deep, stubborn, liability-causing roots." The tree didn't answer, but a single acorn dropped onto the sidewalk with a sharp crack. It sounded exactly like a gavel.